everyone, welcome back to the pond. Pull up a lily pad and get comfortable. Can I offer you some fine bird seed? Maybe a freshly caught tadpole or two. I'd offer you some bread, but we ducks aren't actually supposed to eat bread. So please stop tempting us with your delicious, carbohydrate-y, grainy delights. No, Dee Dee, don't give in! What am I talking about? I'm made of rubber. I don't need to eat. Down here at the pond, we like to treat our friends as members of an elite club with all the amenities that come with living in a tepid pool of water. Just show your member card to the bouncer. Bouncer. Rubber duck. Get it? It was a good joke, Andrew. Oh, keep it up and it's cricket pate on the hors d'oeuvre menu for next week. I suppose we should set aside the formalities and get into our little closed meeting agenda for the day. Last time on Rubber Duck Writing, we left with two tantalizing cliffhangers to be resolved. First up, we have to unravel the deep mysteries of how mountains and rivers work. Where do they come from? Where do they go? How are baby mountains made? Is an earthquake when a mommy mountain and a daddy mountain really love each other? Maybe we should just keep it to where we're going to put the mountains on the map and my vague justification for doing so. Speaking of vague justifications, rivers. We'll also go over where I'm plopping those down and why I think that makes sense. This would also be a good time to note I have no training in geology or riverology. Just ample research on the internet and books to give myself at least a base understanding of these things. If any of you are real experts in, well, anything I'm talking about, please be kind and understand any ignorance on my part isn't meant out of malice. Just a rubber duck with a rubber brain. Before I get back to beating you over the head with the world-building bat, let's take a little detour and talk about those actual story ideas that I hinted at last time, and specifically what it has to do with this little island over here, smack in the middle of the world. Seems a little out of place, like it was put there intentionally, and maybe it was. Or was it? Dee Dee, are you being intentionally confusing again? Why, yes. Yes, I am. Here's why it was originally put here and why it might have a murky future ahead. Back in episode 1, I said the story I'm writing is going to be based on a pulp fiction adventurer type like Doc Savage or that famous one with the fedora and bullwhip. Also that it would borrow heavily from the golden age of exploration with all of its tropes and mystique. A specific aspect of that era I always found fascinating was the existence of explorer clubs. You know, those posh clubs with lounges and smoking rooms decorated from floor to ceiling with big game trophies, maps, artifacts, and all kinds of various memorabilia acquired by questionable means. A place where rich guys could sit around and talk about their adventures with uncontacted indigenous people of the Amazon, how they froze half to death to map the Arctic, their amazing escapes from deadly traps and vicious animals also they could bring back of rare antiquity. Where they sit around and say things like, "Jolly good! What ho, good sir!" or "Bully!" Maybe fight a kangaroo or two. A good chunk of my original inspiration actually came from the old Adventurers Club in Disney World's Pleasure Island, which itself only exists as artifacts of a bygone age. Ironic. From there, I looked into their inspiration and studied real organizations like the Royal Geographical Society, the Explorers Club, the National Geographic Society, and many others. Several of these still exist, and I would absolutely love to go and visit them someday. I knew from the beginning of brainstorming this story that I wanted a big, fancy explorers club for my main character to be a part of and interact with other explorers. Leaning towards it being named something like the League of Explorers. Unlike the clubs here on Earth, this one would be one massive club open to explorers from all around the world, which brings us back to this island. My initial thought was that a group of explorers traveling the world would benefit from an island smack in the middle of the world to set up their club/home base. And so, this island rose from the sea. But things aren't so simple. As I thought about it, there were a few problems that I noticed. First up, there's nothing around this island for hundreds of miles. That would make it slightly hard for it to stay properly supplied and functional. The second problem is one of size. Let's bring back that size comparison map of the United States from the last episode. The island looks small in comparison to everything else, but as you can see here, this island would be roughly the size of Maine. That's huge. One of the key ideas I have for this club and their island is that they run everything about it. There's no nation state or outside ruler telling them what to do. They've managed to make a little explorer paradise all their own. Something the size of Maine would just be too big for them to run. Third is that when you think about it, this island's location has a fair amount of strategic importance to it. Why would a colonial empire sit back and let a group of good time party adventurers control such an important location? With those considerations in mind, I don't think this island will end up being where the League of Explorers sets up shop. I'm not entirely sure I even want this island to exist going forward. We'll see how things play out. It would make for an interesting conflict area between world powers, so maybe it gets to live on as something else. But where will the League call home in the future? Well, you'll just have to stay tuned to see what I decide as I work through a mountain of story choices. Wait, mountains! Ah, that's right, we're supposed to be talking about mountains and rivers today too! Curse you well-intentioned tangents! Quick, let's jump back to the map. Okay, here's the world the last time we saw it. Not too shabby. Awfully flat though. Now to add some texture to really make it pop. Now, how do we do that? Maybe if we close our eyes real hard and quack, we can make the mountains appear. Do it with me now. Quack, quack, quack! Well, shoot, that didn't do anything. Were you all quacking at home? Someone wasn't. William from Oklahoma. Fine, I'll just have to actually do work then. Luckily for us, WonderDraft has a mountain tool that lets us place mountains of various shapes and sizes. Pretty easy. Now, where to put them? Teaching time! If you already know about plate tectonics, or if you had a grade school education, you can be excused from class today. Go hang out in study hall or something. Just don't let me catch you smoking in the bathroom, William. For everyone else, here's a crash course refresher in real-world plate tectonics. As you may know, the Earth's crust is not one big solid piece. It's made up of plates. These plates specifically. These plates are constantly shifting around on a bed of magma. Sometimes they pull away from each other, sometimes they slide against each other, and other times they collide into each other. For mountain placement, we're interested in the places where the plates are bashing into each other. To grossly oversimplify the process, you're here for writing, not a science lecture. When two plates smash together, the crust has nowhere to go but up. Now there's other ways it can go too, but we're only worried about the mountain forming kind of collision right now that create folded mountains. Some examples of this would be the Rocky Mountains, the Andes Mountains, and the Himalaya Mountains. Knowing this, a good place to put mountains would be along plate boundaries. But if you know your geology, you'll notice that not all mountains are located near the current boundaries of plates. The Appalachian Mountains, for example, are nowhere near one of the major plates. Today, don't forget, Earth didn't always look the way it did now. Neither did your planet, unless your setting is really, really early in your planet's life cycle. Various plate combinations made a bunch of different supercontinents and collisions, resulting in mountains away from modern-day plate boundaries. There are also other ways to make mountains, like volcanic mountains that appear over weak spots in the crust, or mountains that form to good old-fashioned time and erosion. There's also block mountains that form along those places where plates slide against each other instead of colliding. Similar idea, but different shapes. Okay, class over for now. So, what does this mean for where to place our mountains? I've seen in other world building resources that it's almost a dogma that you have to know exactly where your tectonic plate boundaries are, and you have to place your mountains along those borders. Now you do you, but I personally don't think that needs to be a hard and fast rule. As you'll see in a moment, I definitely follow that rule for most of my mountains, but there's various reasons you can use to place mountains in other locations. Just if you want to be super accurate about it, maybe look up how those locations would be different. For example, the Rocky Mountains are relatively young and taller, and the Appalachians are much older and smaller because they formed so much earlier from previous collisions, and well, time wears down all of us, even mountains. Also keep in mind that mountains along plates might be more prone to earthquakes than other locations. There's a lot of different geography and earth science you can get into if you really want to. Also ask yourself, is it important to know all those details? Does it really matter to your story? Are you worried about having to defend yourself to irate tectonic experts? Are you as obsessive as a cartoon rubber duck? Enough talk. Let's raise some actual mountains. There we go, finally. Let's take a closer look. Let me start by saying, I'm lazy. I didn't take the time to map out the boundaries of all the actual world plates. Didn't seem super important to have that level of detail. What I did instead was ballpark it. I have a vague sense of how the parts of the continent fit together, and those vague boundaries are how I place the mountains. Let's look at some of the more interesting mountain chains. I'll keep it short. As riveting as I find fictional mountains, I think I might be in a niche minority there. Heading to Gamma first, let's start with the biggest and baddest mountains on the planet. Two of those vaguely defined plates I mentioned collide here to form the tallest mountain chain in the world and the tallest mountain. This would be the equivalent of the Himalayas, and they're so intimidating that they pretty much split Gamma into two halves. When I get into the proper naming of continents, there's a good chance we could see an upper Gamma and lower Gamma separated by this chain, much like how Europe and Asia are part of the same physical landmass, but us humans decided to split them up by deciding the Ural Mountains are a boundary, which opens up a whole discussion about humans determining continents by ideas and culture versus actual physical properties. But that's a whole can of worms for another day. I could go for a can of worms right about now. Let's jump over to Delta next. This mountain chain here is from a plate collision that happened many millennia in the past when Delta used to be connected to Gamma as part of a supercontinent. These foothills are eroded sections of a previously much taller mountain chain. If we slide up north a bit, we have some islands with mountain volcanoes on them. You can tell they're volcanoes because they have these little smoky bits. Ooh, ah! These islands are on the border of a large oceanic plate like the volcanic islands on the Pacific Ring of Fire in our world. If we jump to the other side of the ocean, like this, we have some more volcanoes on the other side of the plate. If I'm being honest, my placement of volcanoes is a little throw things at a dartboard at the moment. There's some logic behind them, but the volcanoes are a work in progress. I don't need to know every volcano for the actual story, but I wanted to mark the general area of where they would be for future reference and cultural development. Development like a thriving city getting Pompeii'd because they ignored the suspicious fiery ruins of the city they built their city on. Last set of mountains is over here on Alpha. In short, these are collision points between these rough plates. I decided that's where I needed mountains to be, so I decided that's where the plates need to be for the mountains to make sense. Working backwards. Why do these mountains need to be here though? Because it's river time. Next time. Once again, I seem to be running out of time. Apparently I have a tendency to ramble when I get excited about things. Next time when we get back to world building, I promise we'll get rivers done. Third time's the charm, right? I'm saying time a lot. While we're on the topic of water, I'll also try to get into ocean currents and how they're going to shape Pond World, its weather and environment. Heads up though, the next episode will be a bit of a departure from the usual topics here. Still going to focus on world building, but taking a field trip to a different planet, in a different franchise, with aliens, blue ones. Coincidentally, also heavily focused on water. If you haven't figured out what I'm hinting at yet, I'll tell you outright next time.
Quack.